Today, we come to September's end. In the coming month, the leaves will grow brighter, the air's caress will feel colder, pumpkins will abundantly adorn doorsteps. Tonight, we'll cast out the month with 6 true Glitch in the Matrix stories. Thanks to everyone who contributed, and may the month of October be good to you. When I was a senior in high school, me and 2 of my friends ditched our class and pretended to be underclassmen, juniors and sophomores, so we could take their yearbook picture as a goof. They were taking photos in the auditorium, so we just simply waited in line, and when the photographer asked what our name was, we lied and said a different student's name so he could take that info and put it into his camera. 6 months later, the yearbooks come out, and it's the last week of school before I graduate. Everyone is signing yearbooks, and then I see the sophomore whose picture I took. He stops me and says, "Hey, you're in my picture." I played dumb and acted like I didn't know what he was talking about, and he showed me. We both started laughing. We end up joking about it for the rest of the week. Years later, whenever we'd reminisce about high school, I'd bring up that story and show people my photo under the other student's name. It was a silly picture. I made sure to make the goofiest, shit-eating grin ever in the photo, and it always made the people I was showing laugh. People would ask me how that happened, and then I'd explain to them the same story that you're reading now. Well, fast forward to a week ago. Same situation came up. Except this time, I was telling the same story to my wife because she never heard it. However, when I went to go show her the photo of me in the yearbook, it was gone. It was replaced with the original student's photo, like that goof never happened. I checked my other yearbooks, thinking maybe I had the wrong one. But that student was 2 grades younger than me, and could have only been in my senior and junior yearbook. When I checked the junior yearbook, his name is listed in the glossary, but no photo of him exists, and the senior one is a picture of him instead of me. I asked my best friend if he remembers me telling him that story and showing him the picture. He vaguely remembers something about it, but it wasn't anything he could quote or swear by. Now, I'm just left wondering what happened. This happened in early 2000 in a small town in Oklahoma. I was a corrections officer at a juvenile detention center. I was working nights at the time, and I went to work at 9 p.m. One night when I arrived for work, my supervisor looked confused and asked me what I was doing there. I said, "I work tonight." He told me, "They said you called in a few hours ago saying you were sick." I was a bit confused and said it must have been someone else and they got the message wrong. After everyone else showed up for work that night, it was a bit more weird, but we carried on as usual and assigned everyone their places for the night. I went to the control room where I usually work. The control room is the center of the prison that has direct control over the cameras, doors, phones, etc. After I relieved the guard on duty and settled in for the night, I looked at the message that said I called in. It said that I had called at 6:50 and that I had gotten sick while cleaning up after the storm. There had been a storm the night before, and it was a bit bad but not anything that I had to go clean up. It was truly weird. The supervisor came into the control room about that time. He was also a friend of mine outside of work, and we started talking about how odd it was. I decided to call my wife at home and tell her about it while he was still sitting there. After 2 ringtones, a man picks up the phone with a raspy voice and says, "Hello." I did not know what to say for a few seconds. I looked at the phone to make sure I dialed the right number, and I had. After a few seconds, the person says hello again in the same raspy voice. I say, "Hello. Who is this?" "This is Taylor. Who is this?" My head started spinning because my name is Taylor also. I said in almost a scream, "Where's Anne?" "Anne's in bed. Who is this?" I dropped the phone and told my supervisor to ring me out. I had to get home. I took off towards the door. Behind me I could hear my supervisor Dave pick up the phone and say hello, followed soon after by, "What the fuck?" I ran to my car and drove home faster than was legal, my mind racing the entire time. I busted through the door and my wife was sitting watching TV and was shocked at me being home. I asked her who was there and she said no one had been there. After a rather long talk with my wife, I went to call the prison back to tell them what was going on. The phone was dead. I went back to work, and when I came in, Dave was acting weird and asked me how the hell am I doing this. He told me that when I left, he picked up the phone and the person on the other end sounded like me. He had freaked out and hung up the phone. A minute later, as he could see my car leaving the parking lot, I had called back from home asking what the fuck was going on. He said I was a bit irate, said I was sick and didn't feel like playing these games, and I told him to stop prank calling me. After convening him, I had no idea what was going on. We went back to work. Later I find out that the phone line for my area had been knocked down the night before by the storm. This is absolutely the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. When I was about 13 or 14, I would always go to church, as my family is very religious. My best friend and her family attended the same church, so I got to know them very well. I noticed that her uncle was in a neck brace. He wore it for a long time, what felt like 6 months, until one day he just stopped wearing it. I thought that the injury had healed over time. So one day I decided to bring it up to my best friend and ask why her uncle had worn the neck brace. She told me he has never had a neck brace or any neck injuries that she knew of at the time. Now, I'm not a very serious person, so I'm sure by me telling her this, she thought I was joking. I left it alone because I just thought it wasn't a big deal. I didn't say anything to anyone about it again until I was 17. My best friend was having a dinner party for her birthday, and her whole family was there. For some reason, I just decided to bring up the question to my friend's aunt about her husband's neck brace. When she heard me talking about it, she was shocked. You could see it all over her face. I thought she was messing with me at first, but then she told me that her husband wore a neck brace in the early 90s, before I was even born. There are even pictures with him in the brace at the time, but I still don't know how I could see a brace around this man's neck when no one else could, and then I'm told that I wasn't even born around the time that this took place. To this day, I still vividly remember seeing my best friend's uncle in a neck brace, and I'll swear by it for the rest of my life. Her aunt always tells me that I've lived a life here already, whenever we talk about it now. It was just the weirdest thing, and I wish there was an explanation. It's not like I went back in time and saw him. It seems like it was literally a glitch in the Matrix. I went to a small private school that was smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood. It looked like it used to be someone's private property, and they just kept adding on buildings. On frequent occasions, you would see someone in one part of the school heading towards the front of the property. When you walked the opposite way, you'd see them a minute or so later in an area that they couldn't have possibly gotten to without passing you. It was always in the same area, right next to the kindergarten building where there was a small gate, and it was the only way to get to the front office and leave the property. If you greeted the person, they would say nothing and have a blank stare. I once recall one of my good friends walking briskly past me. I tried to say hello to her, and she didn't say a word. I was walking back from the office to class, and when I got to class, she was sitting there and had not left. She could not have left and returned in the amount of time it took to walk back to class without seeing her. On an almost weekly basis, people were constantly asking each other, "Weren't you just in the office, or next to the kindergarten building?" But the person had been in a classroom, or running around on a playground. I'd also like to note that the school was incredibly strict, and you were never allowed to run around or walk around the property. 12 years ago, I bought my girlfriend an antique ring. It has a unique design. It wraps around the finger 3 times. We've never married, so she considers the thing as kind of a de facto wedding ring. It's dear to her. This last weekend, I was playing a show out of town which had us staying in a bandmate's RV with their family. When we were driving home from there on Sunday, my girlfriend realized she didn't have her ring. She checked her bag thoroughly, and then said she had a faint memory of taking it off and setting it next to the sink in the RV. Yesterday, we went over and scoured the RV for it, every nook and cranny. Nothing. She went through every pocket in her travel bag again, twice. Nothing. This morning, I hear her say, "What is this?" She had stepped on something right in the middle of our bedroom doorway. It was a small, black plastic piece of my GoPro. It covers the USB charging port. It had disappeared back in February while at a winter cabin in the mountains, possibly even while skiing, as I was taking videos. It had never been found. I had actually replaced it through GoPro. But there it was, right in the middle of the floor, 9 months later. She left for work, and I started thinking that the return of the GoPro piece was a signal that there had been an edit in my inventory, as it were. I suddenly strongly suspected that this meant the ring was back. I went and checked the bag. Right in one of the main pockets, as plain as day, there was the ring. About a month ago, I was standing in my grandmother's kitchen with her front door closed. I glanced towards the living room when in the blink of an eye, it seemed someone or something zoomed through her hallway, made a quick right turn, and went out the front door. The door and wall didn't seem to open, rather it and the entire wall seemed to jump inward about 2 feet, then back again with great rapidity, as if someone had tried to open it and it had been slammed shut. There was a discernible rippling effect as if the matrix had reset itself. I would have dismissed this as a hallucination, except every single dog around her house, and there are plenty, began furiously barking right after the wall jumped back. The closest analogy I could find was when I saw an earthquake coming 2 years ago before I felt it. The air seemed to shimmer in the hills surrounding Palm Springs, and then a fraction of a second later, we were hit with an aftershock of a 5.5 from a few hours before. This particular day, however, I didn't feel anything, despite being a mile from a rail yard. I normally feel and hear when cars there link up, nor was any hanging object swinging, and the QuakeFeed app showed no tremors to account for it. Visual hallucination, subsonic sound, a super fast ghost. I simply couldn't account for it, but the animal's behavior immediately afterward led me to believe that something happened.